Hello, and welcome to another episode of Amiga Retro Adventures. Well, as you can see before you, this is not an Amiga, but it is a Commodore. It is a Commodore 64c. And you can easily tell because it is not the bread bin design, it is the newer design which closely resembles the Amiga 500 or later on the Amiga 1200. So I bought this on eBay. The main reason was for the case. I didn't really care if the motherboard or the computer itself functioned because it was sold as is, and why I didn't really care too much is I needed a new home to put this motherboard that I refurbished and repaired and recapped from another project I was working on. The case that this was originally in was not in good shape, cracked, and bits and pieces of it were falling apart. Now this motherboard here, I had to do repairs on, mainly because of this, and I will show you. When I bought that motherboard you just saw, it came with a black version, same thing though, as this power supply, the original Commodore power supply. These power supplies have no mercy when they decide to malfunction. In my case, and it was my stupidity, on the motherboard you just saw, the black power supply, the original one that came with it, I didn't bother measuring the voltage. I just plugged it in, which is a big mistake, and of course it didn't work. And then when I tracked down the power supply, like I measured the voltages, the 5-volt line was putting out 12 volts. That's not good. So I learned my lesson well then. And as you can see, back to the motherboard I fixed, all these RAM chips here are socketed, and for a reason I had to replace them because, well, 5-volt chips don't really like it when you give them 12 volts. So, like I said, I originally bought this to use the, the case, and the case is in pretty good shape. The badge here is a bit, I don't know if it feels a bit odd. It's not completely flat. There's something going on there, but I can get these off of eBay again, or I can pry it up and see what's going on under there. But the case itself is pretty, it's a bit dirty, but it's in pretty good shape, so it's really, really nice. And you can put the, the older motherboards do fit in here. But lesson learned from what I told you before about the power supply, right here, is this unit I bought off of eBay as well, the SAV64. And what it does is pretty much what it says. It saves your 64 from death. So basically what happens is your power supply plugs into it right here. And the green light means all is well. It's getting, I think once it gets over 5.5 volts, it will trip. There's a series of relays in here. And the LED will go red. There'll be no more power supply going to your Commodore 64. And then once you get the power supply issue sorted out, you just have to hit this, I'll show you a bit here, this reset button here, and it will be operational again. So definitely it's a good sentinel to protect the Commodore 64 from the power supply of doom, because these are getting hard to find, and a few people I've seen online like Yen Beta have made brand new Commodore 64 power supplies, either using the old innards or a new case, and it's pretty good actually. But if you got the original one, you definitely want to get something to protect it from like voltage spikes, or in my case the 5 volts turned into a constant 12. So back to this guy here. Like I mentioned before, I mainly bought this for the case, but it actually works mostly. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to turn this on, the monitor that is, my trusty 1084S, and great monitors by the way, handles pretty much anything, and yeah. So that's on, as you can see by the green light, and I'm going to turn on the Commodore 64 itself. Here we go. Yeah, and it works. You can see we have the right amount of RAM. The 38,911, which is perfect, that's what it should be showing. We have a flashing cursor, that's really nice. The keyboard seems to function just fine. No issues there. And this is an NTSC Commodore 64. So, and PAL ones are kind of hard to find. Of course, you have to get them from overseas. But anyway, everything seems fine, except for one thing. And I will show you. I'm going to put this dead test cartridge in the back here. It's basically a diagnostic cartridge to test basic functions of the Commodore 64. And that's in. And I will turn it back on again. And we'll go back to the monitor here. It takes a while to initialize, but it will come up. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this will test memory, color RAM, you know, a few other things, as you will see. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes to run through. Now the volume on this monitor is currently full volume, and there's a reason for that. Everything seems to work okay to a point, but it does an audio test coming up in about a couple of minutes, and it doesn't do too well. It plays pretty much all the SID channels. I believe there's 3 of them on several different octaves. And it should be pretty loud on a working Commodore 64. But on this one, there's a few issues, which you will see in a moment. Basically, when I ran this before this video, you know, I said, hey, great, this thing works, until I ran this dead test cartridge, and the audio part doesn't go too well. It's very quiet. I don't think this camera is going to pick it up, and you can hardly hear it, but there's a very audible clicking every time it steps up the octaves. So I'm hoping that it is the SID chip, and I think I have one unit I can take the SID chip out of to try. Of course, there's a different version. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's an 85. There you go. So I don't know if you can hear it, but the audio itself, you definitely can hear the clicking. There is music there, the normal, you know, like tones it generates for the test, but something is not right. So what we're going to do is, even though I was only planning on using this for the case, I do not like things that don't work, and this computer is in pretty good shape, so I will attempt to see why the audio is doing that. So one moment. Hello, I've returned. Actually, I wanted to show you, so you could hear the difference between the Commodore 64c, which probably has an issue with the SID chip or something related to the audio output, and the Commodore 64, the older motherboard that I recently refurbished and repaired. So once we get to the audio test, you're going to hear a big difference. Now, I don't know how loud it's going to be because I still left the volume on this good old monitor pretty much at full. So we shall see how loud that is. But you should hear a difference, obviously, between the Commodore 64c, which has the audio anomaly, and the refurbished Commodore 64 of older years. Once we get through this white screen. Any second. Okay, so that just taught me something. The clicking is always there. The volume is the problem. So the clicking previously that we heard was normal, but the audio itself was way too quiet. So we need to see if it's a SID chip or something related to that. So now at least we know where to start from. So the clicking is normal, it's just the audio is way too quiet on the other computer. So we will, I'll just hold off for one moment. We will take this apart, the Commodore 64c, and see what is up. One moment. Okay, so we will now disassemble this fine computer. See what's up. Hopefully I don't move it too much out of frame. I will check every now and then, but unfortunately I cannot see everything simultaneously. So let's put down some protection so I don't wreck this computer more than it already is. A bit of padding. Turn the computer over. Oops, there we go. Basically 3 screws, and that's all it takes to remove these. And sometimes they're Phillips. In my case, they are Torx screwdrivers. I mean screws. There's 1. There's 2. And 3. My lucky number. You can see it's a bit scuffed here and there, but it'll clean up, and we'll do that later once we get this fixed. Okay, so just turn it over like so. Okay, still in frame, maybe a bit over here. Perfect. And it just lifts up. Let me put these screws someplace I don't lose them. One moment. Okay. Push in a bit here, because they are strong clips. Sometimes people can break these off, sometimes not so much. 1 second. This came off easier last time. Okay, there we go. And there. Okay. And then we're going to remove the LED from the case. Put the case over here. Okay, where are we here? Yeah. So we need to take off the keyboard itself, which of course requires a Phillips, which is right here. Remove, takes a while. They have a very fine thread on them, so you have to turn them many times to loosen them. And, oops. Come on, there we go. Trying to put these screws. I should have put these in a bowl, but anyway, I don't have a lot of workspace here. Okay, so the keyboard will come out like so, and then you remove the ribbon cable gently. Okay, it's off. I will put the keyboard aside, somewhere I won't wreck it, and drop it like I'm about to right now. There we go, it's fine. Okay, now what remains are the keyboard support brackets. They will have to come off. And there's a bunch of other screws as well. So we'll take these off first. And this computer, it's all Torx. Like I said, if you take one apart, it might be Phillips. So the support brackets on this, come on. It says partially magnetic. Damn it. That's better. Okay, that's 2. 3. Yeah, this one's attached to the whole frame. They don't come off. So we'll take off the remaining screws on the shielding if it wants to. There's one. Another one. And another one. Oops. And another one. So I think on this one there are 7 in total. 4 up top, 3 on the bottom. And you can see that the shielding also acts as heatsink for the CPU, probably the SID chip, and another one. I think it's the amalgamation of the PLA and other parts, other chips from previous designs. That lifts right off. It's not bad. It's a bit dirty, but like I said, the whole point of this project is to clean up this beast. There's some rust here, but nothing major. I've seen far worse. I've seen some where I swear people poured their entire coffee into the computer. So the 8520, which is the SID chip in the newer versions of, is right here. And you have to replace an 8520 on these boards with an 8520, because if you use the other chip, which I should know the number, but it starts 6581, I believe. It runs at 12 volts. This runs at 9. So yeah, if you put in the other SID chip, it will not function properly. That's it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this chip next. Let me clean some of that goop off of there. I need to get something to clean it up. Just give me 1 second and I'll be right back. What's a second? Well, for you anyways, not for me. But I found something to clean this off with. Ah, there we go. The 8580. And I happen to have another 8580 right here. So I'm going to swap out these chips and see if it's just the chip that has the problem. So I need a chip puller, which I should have brought with me. Yes, it's right here. Okay. Yes, pulling of the chips. Here we go. Be careful at this stage. Don't remove them violently, because they... I always hate doing this part. See, it wants to come out on one side versus the other. So let me try this again. There we go. It has been removed. Pins have not been bent, so it's good. Always take your time, even with chip holders. Sometimes the sockets do not want to let go. I guess it's like an old married couple that's been in there for like 30 years. Okay. Now to transplant the replacement, and always make sure the notch is oriented. If you put these in backwards, there is no forgiving. That is the end of your SID chip. So it is towards the top, and I will make sure all the pins are in. It's in. No bent pins. We're good to go. So let us hook up the power. Let me get all this crap out of the way first. Put this back in here. Okay. Power is being hooked up. Okay. And the monitor. Where are we here? Where did I do? Where did I put that cable? The monitor was sitting on top of the cable. And hold that into place. Okay. Now we will see the dead test cartridge. Where is it? It's buried over here. The problems of having no workspace area. It's in. Perfect. Okay, so let's lower things a bit. The monitor. Okay. Perfect. I'll move this a bit further over. There we go. And maybe a bit further down. Sorry for this. Okay, we're good to go. It is on. Voltage is still fine. Got a nice green LED on the SAV64, and here we go. It is on. Like I said, it takes about 10 seconds to initialize. The good thing about these dead test cartridges, even if you don't seem to get any video output, this still might work properly. If there's any issue with the kernel ROM or something to that effect, I'm not entirely sure. I know way more about the Amiga 500s and other computers than I do the 64s. I never actually owned one. I had a friend that had one. And but I myself, VIC-20 actually was my first computer that I used. Yes, with it's kind of funny, as I get older and my eyesight's not as good. The VIC-20 is actually more suitable because it had such huge characters, easy to read. It's kind of funny how life comes full circle that way. Okay, let's see if it is the chip. If it still does the same clicking but hardly audible part, like the first time, then I know it's not the chip. It's something to do with the audio output circuitry, which I would have to look to later. And I do have schematics available if we have to get to that stage. Let's keep our fingers crossed and hope it's just the chip. If it is, though, unfortunately, the chips are usually about 80-90 bucks on eBay. These chips are not cheap. There are other implementations, replacements, but they're mostly accurate, but not entirely. I always like to keep the original chips if I can. Here we go. Any second. Fingers crossed. Yep. The SID chip was bad. Dun dun dun. Well, that was an easy fix. Well, not really. I now need a SID chip for the computer I stole this out of. But that was an easy fix. So yeah, the chips goes bad, and yes, they do go bad quite often, unfortunately. Not as bad as the CIA chips, apparently, or other ones, but they do fail. So that was it then, I guess. So what I'm going to do now is clean this up and put it back together again. So I will see you in one moment. Oh, it is bath time now for this. There's some dirt on the case, as you saw before. Areas like that, probably rubbing alcohol for the most part. But washing it, I won't bore you with the whole process, but I will wash the top and the bottom part, top's over there of course, the bottom part, and clean up the keyboard a bit. And then I'll get back to you once this is washed, well everything is washed and dried off. And we'll see if the rubbing alcohol can take off the stubborn parts. So I should be back in a few moments, or instantly in your time. So I will see you shortly. Hello, I am back. Oh, some water here. There we go. The case actually cleaned up really well. The front was in the best shape. What I like about this is the color seems to be pretty much spot on for when it was released. None of that horrible yellowing due to UV light and under exposure. So I'm going to try just this spot here with rubbing alcohol. I won't put you through the rest of the cleaning process, but let's just see how well rubbing alcohol takes care of that. Now I did remove a smaller spot previously before I turned the camera on. So without moving this too much, let me try and see if it comes off. Oh yes. So it must have been marker or something. Not sure what it is actually. Yeah, pretty much. Try down here. Oop. The thing about rubbing alcohol, that's exactly what you have to do. Lots of rubbing, but it's not destructive, and it does eventually remove blemishes, scuff marks, all that fun stuff. But as you can see, it is coming off. So off camera, I'm going to finish this up and throw it back together again, and and do some tests. So bear with me, and I shall be back shortly. Thank you. So I'm pretty much done the cleaning, but unfortunately, oh, come on, focus. Anyway, final test by 8 did not survive. Oh well, that was on the bottom of the case. No big deal. There's always sacrifices must be made. I am back, and now well, to me at least, the most unfavorable part of this job is cleaning this keyboard, which is actually in pretty good shape, but there's obviously some gunge on it. It's dust bunny wise, there's not a lot in there, but unfortunately the only way to really clean this properly, the keys, is to remove them. Now luckily on this board, or this keyboard I should say, like, get that out of the way, they come off pretty easy, at least the function keys do, as I will show you. And there you go. You can use a key puller. I don't happen to have one. Well, I do, but you know, like everything else, when you need it, it is nowhere to be found. So I'm going to throw these into the sink of suds right there, like that, and keep a note of these springs, and also like that in there. I think the Spacebar ones are different, so I'll keep them separate. Other than that, I'm going to take a picture of this so I don't, get the keys messed up and cause mass confusion. So I shall clean this keyboard up, as you can see, and I will be back shortly. Okay, here we are again, back with the keys off the keyboard, and it is a bit dirty, as you can see, so I'll clean that up the best I can. That's, I guess, the caps lock, something to that effect. Yeah, I'm trying not to, I might put some contact cleaner in here, but everything else pretty much just clean the surface. Now, I was mentioning before about the Spacebar. So, if you see these two springs, maybe if I lower this camera a bit, you'll see more. Slowly. There we go. As you can see, if I zoom in a bit, they are different sizes. So there's only one. This is a spacebar. All the other keys were like this, so don't get them mixed up. So that one goes back in there, and this one I will keep off to the side, which happens to be also with the retaining, I don't know, clip doohickey that goes on the spacebar as well. So as long as you don't get those mixed up, you'll be fine. Excellent. And now I will clean the keys, which will be very, very exciting. And I will put everything back together again, and I will, I guess I'll see you then. So I'll see you in a few minutes, I hope. Okay. Hello, I have returned. The keyboard is now cleaned. I just have to put the keys on. And as you can see, hopefully without the glare, it's very clean actually. It came out nice. And this metal shield, put a bit of vinegar on it. It got rid of most of the rust. It should be fine. But overall, this thing is in really good shape. I mean, really, this shield is like really, really, really nice. And even over here on the motherboard itself, it's in really good shape. I mean, if you look at it, it's almost immaculate. And on the bottom here, oops, that's not the bottom I wanted to show you. The bottom of the shield is also in very, very good shape. This was a really good find. It was 80 bucks Canadian, I think, plus shipping for something that wasn't tested. I took, I just wanted the case. This actually might become my main unit, I think. The other one just kept for nostalgic purposes. And over here are 1,000 springs and one right there. And the keys, which I dried off, and I'll let them dry a bit longer in air. And then I just have to throw all of those keys onto that keyboard. So once that's all done, I will throw it all together and show you the results. Hello. I'm about to put this Commodore 64c back together again, but I wanted to try this. As you know, just like the Amiga, I'd say close to 80 to 90% of the software requires PAL, not NTSC. So this newer board actually has a jumper on it, as you can see, for open NTSC, and short equals PAL. So what it was is basically just two solder pads, and I just bridged it with a solder blob, which is covering most of it. It'll be fine, and it's a nice clean connection. So when I put this back together again, I will see if it actually is running in PAL mode, and we will know because if you remember before, looking at the monitor, we had the black bars on the top and bottom, and you'll also notice from, oops, considerably, that was my extra pair of glasses I was using, sorry for that. Yeah, there'll be considerably more flicker as well. So, yeah, I'll throw this thing back together again and we'll fire it up. Okay, I have returned. It's pretty much together now. Looks really, really nice. I'm going to put the top back on. And I mean, super shiny shield. I mean, except for the odd speck of rust, it's in really good shape. So once I put the lid back on, the top part, we'll see if it still works, plus if that PAL modification actually turned it into PAL. Now, one thing to remember is it's fine here, but that PAL jumper, just like if you can do it with the Amiga, this RF modulator will always output NTSC. So what happens on this end, if you have converted to PAL, but it's actually a PAL machine with the composite and all the video output geared for PAL, even though you can play games on it, if you have something that can't understand the color signal, you'll get, like this monitor, it'll display, but the image will be black and white. But now that won't be an issue here because this is NTSC for this region. So the timing for the VIC chip and all that will be in PAL. Everything will work fine, but if you actually, for some reason in North America, had a PAL television and plugged the composite into it, it would be in black and white as well because it would not, understand the color signal because it operates at a different frequency. But for all intents and purposes, it will work just great here. So hopefully that modification worked, and I will be right back once I finish assembling this. Hello, I have returned. So this PAL modification, I guess I'm way too used to the Amiga, especially in the later series when the Agnes chip, or Fat Agnes, was capable of doing both, and pretty much it was just being referenced to ground or whatever. It was just a pretty easy hack to get an NTSC Amiga to run in PAL. Well, unfortunately, just that jumper was not sufficient. You also need to replace the VIC-2 with a PAL version, and you had to replace the oscillator crystal with one that was also PAL compliant. So I actually had a motherboard kicking around that was a PAL, which was defunct, so I borrowed the parts off of it. So I did replace the crystal. Of course, the jumper is still there. My finger's in the way, right there. And the VIC-2 chip, the PAL version, which is the 8565 versus, I believe, the 8562 was the NTSC version. So now it works in PAL, so you can play a majority of the demos and games now. The only thing is the monitor I have, just as the previous unit before it died that I borrowed these parts off of, my monitor doesn't know what to make of the PAL signal. It displays it, but there is no color. So even though I thought this was an NTSC modulator, it still just outputs black and white, which is fine. I have, if I hook it up to my home theater system, it automatically detects it and it's up in color on my big screen TV, so that's not a big issue. Because I'd rather have that, because right now, like I said, I can get color, just not on that monitor. But you pretty much, just like on the Amiga scene, you pretty much have to have the system run in PAL natively, or else a lot of stuff just doesn't work right, or especially with the Commodore 64 at all. So I will, as they say, button this up and show you the final product. Hello, and welcome back. Everything works great, but being the perfectionist I am, or it's a mild case of OCD, I'm not sure. Though it might look fine on camera, there's a bit of wavy bumps starting about here. And I'm not sure if it's the glue has lifted or something's gotten underneath there. I don't know. So I'm going to remove this and see if I can clean it up, re-glue it. So wish me luck here. My trusty screwdriver. I've already pried this, this end here. Come on. Scratch this. Like I said, I already pried this end loose. Okay, maybe not cooperating. One moment. There we go. Try not to break it or bend it. Yeah. Okay, as you can see, it has been cleaned up of all the residual glue. Couldn't really get much of the dent or the wave. It looks like someone, of course you can't see it because of the focus anomaly, might have grabbed it on the end and tried to peel it off and then changed their mind or reattach it, because it's pretty much bent in the middle. But it still looks pretty good. And I somewhat got it flattened out, so I just have to put some glue on there. And that is good to go. Okay, next I will see if I can do some test games on my big screen TV so we can see some color on this. And I will be back when I have all that set up. Hello, and welcome to the floor of my living room. And on here we have the Commodore 64, the SD2IEC, and to the far left, an actual, real, bona fide floppy drive, the 1541 Mark II. So the issue I was having is I wanted to wrap up this video by playing a game on this refurbished Commodore 64, which really wasn't refurbished. I mean, I cleaned it up and turned it into a fully functional PAL unit, so I can play pretty much all demos and games that are available for the Commodore 64. But lo and behold, when I use the SD2IEC here, it loaded, but that's as far as it got. Nothing actually happened. So there might be some odd compatibility issue. So once I get everything copied over here, we will try, with luck I hope, to make sure that the game works. So the copy process is taking place as we speak, using draw copy right here. Very slow process. It's not the program's fault, it's the 1541's fault, but everyone that has a Commodore 64 is aware of the bug plaguing these drives. So anyways, this will continue. I have one more disc to do after this, and then I'll join you at that time and we'll see if this game loads. See you in a bit. Hello and welcome back. Well, I failed miserably on my last task of copying the 4 disk images from the SD2IC to the 1541 floppy drive. The first 2 disks went okay. The other 2 not so well. I swear the 1541 was going to grind itself out of existence, but nothing wrong with the drive. It's just obviously there was an issue copying the actual images. So I found another game, which hopefully will run as we wait for it to load. It is loading. The SD2IEC is accessing. Ah, there we go. Success. And now the infamous run command. Let's see what happens here. RUN. Ah, excellent. That brings back memories. And we will wait a bit more. Yes, the Commodore 64 teaches you patience. Lots of patience. Now this is the infamous Cracktros, of course, for these free games. So I will have to get past this. One moment. And I shouldn't need any of that, because I don't plan on playing this game for any length of time. Ah, there we go. It's a platform type game, like most of the games were back then, and I will see how well I do. See how well this works. Jellyland, yes. Lots of jelly. So it's called Mayhem in Monsterland. 1993. Excellent. I have a status of sad. Let's go. And see how quickly I die. Oh. Damn it. You're supposed to jump on them, I guess? Yes, we are. Here we go, jumping. Oh. Yes. I didn't say I was good at this. I did play this briefly on when this computer was the NTSC variant, and it played, but you got a lot of weird graphics corruption on the edges of the screen, so it definitely plays much better in PAL, which is pretty much the story for the Amiga and the Commodore 64, because they were very popular in Europe. So 90% of the games were designed for that region of the world. So I would say this is a success. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a success, but the game is. So excellent. Excellent. So that is that. So it looks like this computer is fully operational, and that's a good thing. So that ends it for this episode. I'm planning on doing a Vampire V600 video probably the next couple of days, so I should have that out and you can see how that works. Excellent. Well, that's it for this episode. And as always, thanks for watching. Lots of lightning, yes.